are very excited to have here live for you today, Doc Searls. Doc,
Hey
say
there.
hello.
Hey there, everybody.
Hey, and
Good
of
to
course,
see
we've
you.
got Ben and Desi will be coming on soon. So, Doc, tell us what you've been doing lately. It's so amazing to
Oh
have you
my
here.
God.
And I was reading up on everything last night, everything you've been talking about personal AI versus corporate AI, which I didn't really know what you meant. And so I was been digging deeper
Yeah.
into that. And it's so many different facets that make that up and everything. Tell us a little bit
Yeah,
about
it's
this
like
whole
it's like
concept.
facets of a polyhedron that does not yet exist. So it's kind of like Euclid's drawing of a polyhedron. Um, it so a few months ago, I was intrigued when I heard um, the a clip from Sam Altman's keynote at OpenAI's Developers Day, where he was heard to utter about a half hour in this line. We believe, and I'm reading it here, that AI will be about individual empowerment and agency on a scale we've never seen before. And my mind went back to the 70s because I'm old. And so I remember a lot of old stuff. And there was a time, which is most of all of computing history until the 70s, when it was all mainframes. If you were doing computing, you needed a big one, and it was in a raised floor in a room, and guys in white coats, and you got a timeshare to be on there, maybe, but it was not yours. And when people talked about personal computing, which came along as an idea, it was an oxymoron. It was contradictory. Personally, it was like personal ocean liner, or personal ice cap or something. It it was not something that one thought one could have for oneself. And while I'm guessing that what Sam means by that is that you're going to get all kinds of wonderful things from us and from our partners like Microsoft, and we are getting those. I mean, I'm having fun with Dolly and ChatGPT and the others as well. But I'm still using somebody's mainframe essentially. I'm not. It's not mine. I don't have it on my own. And what do I want for myself? Well, actually, this is something we've been working on with something called Project VRM, which stands for Vendor Relationship Management, is the customer side counterpart of customer relationship management. Ever since they started a project to look at that in 2006 at what was then the Berkman Center at Harvard when I was a fellow there. And that's still going. There's a big conversation that's been going on for 18 years about this. Um, but so basically, to sum up what we would like, we being any one human being, if you have, what about having an AI of my own? And not so I can entertain myself, but although that'd be fun, but because I would love to make better sense of the confusing mess that my electronic life tends to be, such as all my healthcare data. You know, I have healthcare data from 19 different providers over many years. I would love to throw all that into a machine and have it come back out to me with something that makes sense. Put it together with my travel history. When I got a pulmonary embolism in 2008, was that right after I took a flight? I don't know. I can answer that question because it's there. That the knowledge is there, and an AI can help me with that. Um, with finances, what are my holdings, my obligations, my recurring payments, um, sources of income? What are, I mean, we could do a much better job with passwords than we have right now, with the various password managers that are out there. I would think that AI could help a lot with that. It'd be much more secure if it was mine and not a suction cup on a corporate tentacle that has its own interest in heart ahead of mine, as well as a lot of exposure out there on the net. Property, what have I got? Where is it? I live in three different places, actually. This is Bloomington, Indiana. For those watching, behind me is a very tiny bookshelf that's a small replica of much bigger ones and more capacious ones I have in Santa Barbara, California, and what is now my son's apartment in New York. And, I would love to point my phone camera or any camera at that and have an AI say, oh, those are all of George Lakoff's books. Those are the collected works of John McPhee. There is this over here and that over there. What do I have on Kindle versus there? Um, and what's in them? I mean, there's so much that um, a good AI would be able to help me with to make sense of my life. On the other hand, on my contacts, my calendar, matching these things up, business relationships, um, the associations I belong to, travel. I have 1.6 million miles with United alone. That's interesting to me. And like, when was I where? What was I doing at that time? Because matching it up with the calendar in some intelligent way would be helpful. And the list goes on. I mean, we've wanted for a long time to do what we call intent casting, which is completely reversing the way advertising works. So for example, right now, I'm actually in the market for a car. I'm not being aggressive about it. I know exactly what I want. It's a 2019 Audi Allroad or Volkswagen Sportwagen. That's what I'm looking for. Carvana helps me a little bit with that, but it's still its system, not mine. I would like to just advertise out there to the part of the world that might have what I want, what I'm looking for. And so much of I mean, advertising is like now a $2 trillion industry that's all based on guesswork, to a large degree also based on spying on us, which is terribly rude and would be illegal if it was being done in the physical world. Um, as a matter of course, and coming up for the most part with really lousy guesses at what we might want and what um, uh, Eli Pariser came up with in a book called a 2012 book called The Filter Bubble. He had a great one-liner, which is a bad theory of you. I actually think that, advertising is a bad theory of us, that we do nothing but shop all the time. I'm not shopping right now. You aren't either. You'll get advertising anyway. So that's a
Yeah.
broken system. How can we fix it? But I don't think that system can be fixed. I think it can be replaced by something that starts with the individual and moves outward. And we started doing that with PCs in the 70s and 80s. The internet had enormous promise for this. Four of us wrote about it in a book called the Cluetrain Manifesto in 2000, and a website before that got a lot of action. I wrote about it in something called the Intention Economy in 2012. We don't have it yet. I don't know how long it's going to take us to have it. I hope AI can help. So the question I have for Ben or for anybody is this conceivable? I mean, by this, I mean, can I have an AI of mine? Yes, it can live in a off-site somewhere, but if it is entirely mine and responsible to me and an agent of me and works for me, um, is that a reasonable request? Can that actually happen?
Yeah, I think that is a reasonable request, and how big a role that will play or should play in the evolution of the internet and the sort of collective intelligence on the planet is a complex question to me. I mean, I have no doubt that corporate controlled or national government controlled AI is, a piece of shit in many ways. It's very sophisticated algorithmically, but on the other hand, so much of that sophistication is spent just trying to help corporations make more and more money to maximize shareholder value rather than serving any broader good for humanity or serving the needs of the individuals involved, right? So it's ridiculous how much resource that takes. Like, I mean, you look at a project called Signal, which makes a perfectly nice messaging app, has like, I don't know, 50 or 100 employees or something, not that many people. So why do you have so many more employees for commercial messaging apps that have no additional useful features, right? Just it's all about advertising. It's all about how to layer on top of the product's basic functionality stuff aimed at making you, or not making you, but guiding you to buy stuff that someone wants you to buy, right? Which is crazy. So, I mean, the whole idea that the first real thinking machines on the planet might emerge with their top level goal guiding their whole cognition being maximize shareholder value for this company or maximize domination for this country. I mean, that's completely insane, right? And that is the sort of default direction that the modern AI world is going in. On the other hand, the idea that serving individual humans should be the sort of be all and end all for the next generation of AIs is also questionable to me. I mean, yes, I would like to have a personal AI to serve me and help me do the various things I need to do better. And I think that should happen. It will happen, and it should be under my sovereign control and should be relatively transparent to me how and why it's doing what it's doing. On the other hand, it seems like a lot of the interesting things that happen in the world today are due to collective intelligence, not in the explicit control of any one individual. And the progress of software and science and culture, it does have its own momentum and its own sort of self-organizing emergent intention, you might say, which is not the same as the intention of the individuals involved. So I mean, I think you want personal AI that will help the individual and be under the guidance of the individual. I also think you do want AI that's interfacing with humanity at the collective intelligence level, but not in a way that's controlled by corporations and countries, which are among the more fucked up, albeit more influential and in some ways functional forms of collective intelligence out there. And how to wrest the momentum in AI development away from corporations allied with governments is quite tricky. I mean, open source helps, but open source in itself is not enough, which is something I'm interested to get your input on. Is like what's the value open source has for driving AI forward in the next phase, and what are the limitations of open source in terms of the impact it can have on guiding AI in a beneficial direction.
Well, there's a lot on the table there. I'd like to say just to sort of parenthetically that I'm not sure that everything corporations do are necessarily bad. I'm not sure it's all just for shareholder value. I mean, Steve Jobs rather famously a long time ago said he didn't give a shit at all about shareholder value. He just wanted to make good stuff. And he was an artist. He wanted to do art. I mean, that was his main thing. Please buy my art. Doesn't mean he cared that much about the individual, but he did care about art. And that's kind of what made him go. And I think lots of companies pursuing their self-interest have resulted in a lot of decent things and good things in the world. But I'm with you on the, but I'm with you on the dangers of having only ravenous corporate interests running the whole show, and especially in cahoots with government is also kind of scary. As for open source, I don't know. I mean, I'm one of the people that got the world to talk about open source. It wasn't even in common vocabulary outside the military before 1998, when a bunch of geeks got together and said, let's get the world to talk about open source. I was one of them. I was the editor with Linux Journal for 24 years.
I remember. I was around then too. So
yeah. And so you know how that went, and it was a great project to get the world to talk about open source and kind of get what it is. I mean, to me, it's just the building method. It's like, hey, we have frame construction now. Anybody can do it. You can all do carpentry. It works like this. You cut boards into these shapes, and anybody can make anything they want about it with it. And it's a development methodology, and it's a good one. It's not the only one, and it's not. To me, it's necessary but insufficient, given a whole lot of other considerations. I think as more code gets written by AIs or assisted by AIs, that's an interesting thing too. And I think obviously you need open source involved in that, or that's not going to work very well. But I should say I have a lot of fun with AI. I think it's just an awesome thing, and there's something that Clay Shirky said to a class I was sitting in on at NYU a few years ago, where he put assignments out to the class to come up with ideas for something. Like, here's a bunch of data, go ahead and come up with ideas about what to do with this. And one of the students came back and said, well, I don't really want to share this because I can think of so many bad uses for it. And he said, oh my God, that must be a great idea. Any great idea was going to have bad uses. I mean,
Yeah.
look at, would we have invented email if we knew that 99.x% of it was going to be spam? Probably not, but it is, and we live with it, and it's okay. It's and there's sort of an iron law, or maybe a softer metal law, that says what in technology, whatever can be done will be done until we find out what sucks about it, and we'll try to stop doing that. We did it with nuclear power. We've done it with rocks and stones and hammers and other things, and weapons. AI, I don't think is going to be a whole lot different that way. There will be lots and lots of bad uses for it, and bad actors. And bad actors are really good at doing what they do. But I have more faith in good actors on the whole, because I think human beings are a very creative species, and we need to be able to be creative and do things that are useful for each other and for ourselves and in the world. And that's fun and interesting stuff. And tearing it down and cutting under it and blowing things up because that gets your rocks off is not as productive for the species or the planet as a whole. And so the stuff that is good for the species and the planet as a whole tends to win out if we ignore the fact that we're a rapacious and pestilential species that probably will ruin the planet. Setting that aside.
Rapacious and pestilentious. Wait a second.
Yeah, pestilential. No, we are. But any apex species that has no natural enemies is going to do that.
Yeah.
I mean, we call coal a resource. It's not. Coal doesn't think of itself as a resource. It's a fossil, and it's been here for 300 million years, and it doesn't want to get hauled out of the ground. But we say, no, we'll just take all of it until it's gone. That's not exactly conservative, is it? But anyway, that's a different rabbit hole.
I think Desi is ready to ask a question. Desi.
Okay.
We're always in suspense. Desi!
How do you perceive the role of governments and regulatory bodies in fostering an environment that encourages individual empowerment with AI, while also addressing potential risks and ensuring accountability?
I actually don't have a lot of faith in governments. I hate to say that. I think they're necessary. I had enormous hope for the GDPR before it happened. It became enforceable on May 25th, 2018, which is, I remember it's the 25th because that's my wedding anniversary. And what happened is that it made, on the whole, our experience of work of using a browser much more complicated. By the way it went, it's like, wow, the GDPR exists, and talk about the marketplace at work. What happened was the GDPR created a market for like a $200 billion, maybe even larger business in GDPR compliance, which consists entirely of ways to obey the letter of the GDPR while screwing its spirit. That's what you see every time you see a consent notice in front of a website. And it has made the life much more complicated than it was. Hasn't improved things a great deal. There's more spying on us than ever. In Europe, they're going out of their way. They've done a great job of coming up with lots of laws and regulations having to do with privacy, but they're all based on the premise that your privacy is a grace of the sites and services of the world rather than of your own agency. And I'm fighting that, and a bunch of people I work with are fighting that. But for example, we've been working 6 years now on a standard called IEEE P7012, which is for machine readable personal privacy terms. These are terms that you and I can proffer and sites and services can agree to. We both get a signed copy of it, and we walk away with that. And if if that term says, go ahead and follow me, but only on your site and only for your own purposes, and don't give the data to anybody else, sign here. And we both get a copy of it and walk away, and we can adjudicate that later or dispute it later because we both have a copy of it. And there's accountability built into a system that isn't actually very complicated. So that what that will do, if it actually exists, is obviate a lot of what the GDPR, has caused the world to have, which are all these consent notices where we agree to something. There's no record of it. Somebody else has it. There's
We
nothing
have
we
no
can do with
idea
it.
what we're agreeing
We have
to.
no idea what happens with
It's
that. I mean, it's
supposed to
complete.
make everything
It's
better, but
it's also it's all theater, and it's all it is beyond absolute bullshit. I
it
mean,
is
there's
security theater.
there is
Yes.
not there is not an adjective strong enough to say what degree of bullshit that is, and yet it's it's normative in the extreme, and all the lawyers behind all those things, they see a way to make money doing that. So trust arc and others that supply those services to the sites of the world, get a lot of money out of that. But the truth is, if they just simply have a record of, hey, everybody that came to our site, we agreed to their terms. Their term says we're not going to follow them out of here. Great. GDPR, go away. European regulators, go away. We got to deal with the people who come here. It's easy. It would be really
Yeah.
easy to do. It's taken us 6 years to even think through it, and we're really close to the end. But
6
it's
years. I was writing about the need for a privacy standard in 1998. It was one of the first stories
Yeah.
I did for XML.com. And I got so much shit for that story, as like it was just this boring thing that nobody cared about. Why was I bothering to write about it? Nobody wanted to think about it. And it reminds me of when a friend of mine was trying to explain the need for encrypted email in 2002 to me. And I wasn't getting it, right? Because it was too hard to realize that actually all the email is just a free-for-all for whoever
Yeah,
wants
it's
to catch it, right? You can't, so people, I think it's so much. I think now finally, at least I'm hoping that you get a more positive response. That people are taking it serious. They had to see how bad it could get without it, right? Now they know
well,
they need it.
I keep thinking, well, it can't get worse than it does. There's The internet came without privacy, just like nature came without privacy, right? We had to invent clothing and shelter and doors and locks and shutters and shades and means in the physical world to provide what we call privacy. And that took thousands of years, right? And conventions around that, manners, that we can signal to each other that's okay and that's not okay. Um, Different cultures have different sense of personal privacy and space and so forth, and what needs to be covered and what doesn't need to be covered. But conventions do develop, and we have manners around that. We got none of that on the internet. It's kind of like, you know, the advertising world out there said, "Hey, look, everybody's naked. And on top of that, they're busy exposing themselves everywhere. What could be better? Let's just take advantage of that. Let's do it in secret, and then let's actually set up a giant auction system where whatever our cookies find out about where people have been and what they're doing can get sold to other parties, and it's a giant free for all that nobody knows. It's a 4-dimensional shell game that where lots of money flows, and we see none of it, and we don't see it even operating. What a great system! But that's where we still are right now for all of the regulatory intervention that we've seen. Um, I'm not sure that. Well, maybe privacy does need a standard. What we're trying to do is simply say, you know what, we have informal and vernacular agreements in the physical world, but maybe in the online world, we really need contract. We really need, hey, we both signed this thing that says you're going to respect what I say my privacy requirements are. And unless you're in the business of as many sites are, we're just going to make money by giving all your data away. Thank you for coming here. We exist for that purpose.
Yeah. So
So
that
Yeah. It's like they
but
figured
we
out
could,
that was
but
just the easiest
we can
thing to do.
separate. My point here is that we can separate wheat from chaff here. There are zillions of sites and services out there that actually have no interest whatsoever in selling your data or even being in that business at all. And I think we need to surface those. And I think by having a whole lot of them work with this standard, would be awesome.
Great.
I
Hey,
mean,
Desi. Oh, go
in
ahead.
general, that's true, but AI does need data to do its thing, and that, I mean, this goes back to the limitations of open source as a methodology. I mean, I think that it's amazing and great that the AI field runs on open source now. And I mean, essentially all recent AI innovations are published in papers posted on archive.org and similar places. And there's code in GitHub, GitLab, and there's Jupyter Notebooks, Google Collabs, right? So, I mean, the fact that the AI revolution is happening in the open science and open source world in terms of code and algorithms is important, right? I mean, this allows US and China and Russia to collaborate on AI algorithms in spite of all these legal rules and national political tensions and so forth. On the other hand, if you just take the open source code for something like Facebook's Llama LLM or their music gen music model without the right training data, you cannot make it do what the pre-trained AI models they have launched actually do, right? So I mean, you need the open source code, which is great. You need understanding of the algorithms, which is open, but you also need data, and then you need processing power, right? And so in that way, it's a little different than some other kinds of software, right? Because if you have the code for Linux operating system and the know-how and one laptop, I mean, you can do Linux, but having the code for Music Gen or Llama 2 and a computer doesn't let you do it, right? So I mean, unless you have some way of democratizing, which isn't quite the right word, of
Yeah,
opening,
there's another word required. Yeah.
Participatizing, right? Unless you have some way of making broadly accessible the data and the processing power, then open source only goes part way toward making broadly accessible the ability to create AIs, right? And that's a point that the ecosystem of the internet hasn't really grappled with yet. And then bring that back to privacy. I mean, okay, the way big tech has trained these amazing models is using data that people uploaded for other reasons, right? Like Facebook trained Music Gen
Panopticon data. The Panopticon.
Yeah,
data.
I mean, they trained Music Gen on all the music that bands upload to Facebook, right? I mean, they trained Llama 2 on everybody's Facebook posts, as well as common crawl data from the rest of the internet. So if you want to make comparable bodies of training data widely accessible to any developer, I mean, you would need something. Either people are going to do it quasi legally or illegally, or you need some way for people to opt in to sharing their data to train a model, which is made broadly accessible. And same with processing power. I mean, there are ways to make processing power available to groups without shitloads of money, which is like what protein folding at home and SETI at home were doing, right? But I mean, then again, you need some better way to drive that aspect forward. So it's to me, it seems there are no technical obstacles to complementing open source with ways to make masses of training data and masses of processing power broadly accessible, along with the broad accessibility of AI code and algorithms. But it's not something that massive resources are going into now, because the resources behind AI are big company or oriented, and this isn't what big companies are motivated to do, right? I mean, and it's not that what big companies do is all bad. Like I love Music Gen, right? And I've had great fun using generative image models out of various corporations to make illustrations for books and so forth. So it's good stuff in the scheme of things. I'm happy exists.
Well, we're all using it. We're all using it.
Yeah,
It
it
may not be around forever as it is now.
no, and I mean I'm using this super cool phone made by Samsung, aka Korean government, running Google software, right? So I mean,
Mhm.
it's good stuff. On the other hand, could it be even better stuff if it were developed in a more broadly accessible way? Better both in terms of meeting my needs and in terms of the ethical foundation behind it and how the people underlying the making of it are treated. Yeah, it could be better, right? So then the question is how do we drive things toward a future where these other aspects complementing open source are there to make AI more participatory and more broadly accessible. And I think a consequence of having an open, more broadly participatory AI ecosystem beyond just open source, one consequence of that will be getting more personal AIs. But that's not the only consequence you'd have from that.
Well, it's an interesting question about. I mean, we have a gigantic four-dimensional matrix of manners that haven't been developed yet about what data we share and for what reasons. Now that AI is in the world, it's even much more complicated. Do you want this to train machines or not? I have over 100,000 photos online, for example. I do photography. I have no problem with. I'd like those to train LLMs or whatever. I have no trouble actually surfacing all my health records for that matter. There's nothing I feel especially secretive about. I think some of it will be interesting to others. I have a fairly rare blood disorder, which is not of no serious any consequence at all in my daily life. It's just an oddity that's worth studying, and there are only 1,000 known cases in the world. Hey, have fun with it, go with it, run with it somewhere. I'd love to have an AI in the future be able to take a look at that and other oddities in my and anybody else's medical profile or DNA and the rest of it to make better diagnoses and and everything else. I mean, there's so much I would love to share, but I'm a sharing kind of guy. A lot of people aren't, and it's a and right now, all of the copyright maximalists are like, oh, like the New York Times. Oh, you're using my stuff. You're using our stuff. We want to get paid the old-fashioned way for this because we want everybody to clear rights for everything everywhere, like corporations did, up until the internet came along and actually made rights clearing for everything almost impossible. Which, by the way, is the reason why, for the most part, there are no music podcasts. Because you have to clear rights individually for everything, unless you get some blanket kind of thing, and that hasn't been worked out yet. But it's allowed podcasts to bloom as a talk medium and a spoken word medium. In the meantime, giant streamers are the ones making the big deals with the record companies, and the artists get squat, out of that,
Yeah.
Yeah.
fractions of
Well,
fractions of pennies. So
it's just the
and
TV patriarchy making it back over to the
yeah, but
internet.
it's the same patriarchy. I mean,
Right, it's the same one. It just took them 20
it's
years to
NBC
get back
Universal. I
control.
mean, yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
the DMCA was, as I understand it, was to a large degree written by NBC Universal or whatever it was called at that time in 1998. And it was entirely based on the assumption that everybody needs to clear rights for everything, and we own everything, and that's just the way it goes. And
Sonny Bono always wanted copyright to be forever. That's what
yeah,
she
yeah,
said on the floor
yeah,
of Congress.
yeah, and what's his name? Forever less a day. I think that's what whoever it was that ran the RIAA at the time or whatever it was. But
Yeah,
it's
RAAA.
it's yeah, we have to work all this stuff out, and there are many different we's. We say we. Who's that? I mean, it's
Yeah.
different interest groups working together and against each other, and but a lot of, I mean, we're maybe 2 decades seriously into the digital world we're going to have for not only many decades but probably millennia to come if we don't all kill ourselves. And This is a
What can I
state
say?
change in the world that is gigantic. It's massive. It's bigger than, I asked a friend of mine once, what is it? Is it bigger than, do you think this is bigger than movable type or speech or Scribble and he said, no, it's the biggest thing since oxygenation, which happened 2 billion years ago. And I think it is. I think we are becoming digital beings now,
Yeah.
along with, as well as physical ones. And that's new to human experience.
Certainly,
Cool.
certainly is new to human experience, and our society is so bad at sort of explicitly, consciously, intentionally dealing with much simpler things like climate change or warfare or something, right? We're so bad at dealing with these much simpler problems. It seems hopeless that the explicit level of conscious planning and judgment and direction we're able to deal with the technological singularity. I mean, we'll parties will try and we'll make efforts, but in the end, I mean, it's an evolution that is happening, and our conscious planning and attempts to direct it are going to be just small parts of the overall phenomenon that's occurring. And yeah, that's amazing and fascinating time to be alive, right? So
Yeah.
I wanted to ask some things about the intention economy, actually. So the Cluetrain Manifesto. I remember that book well because it was maybe 96, 97. I left academia, which was my initial career. I was a math professor. I left academia to do an AI startup in New York with a bunch of people. So I was just trying to understand like the whole world. I mean, the internet was new, right? It was exciting. I was trying
Yeah.
to
It's great.
understand internet marketing and launching products for people online to use. So it was exciting, sort of a breath of fresh air sort of book at that time. And some of what was in there now seems obvious. Some of it we're still waiting for. And with the intention economy, I feel even more like that, like the core thing there, the idea that the buyer, the consumer, and their sort of autonomous intention should be the driving factor behind the economy. I'm not sure if we've gone further toward that or further away from that since that time. And this goes back to corporate AI. Like, to what extent are AI tools trained by big corporations to maximize their financial metrics just shaping what people feel like is their intention? And of course this gets into the whole philosophy of free will. Like, I could feel like, well, my intention is that I need to buy these plastic toys. I really want these plastic toys. I feel like I want them, and I have the agency to go to 100 websites and find the best deal on these plastic toys. Yet the reason that I feel like my core intention is to buy these plastic toys, it may happen to be that I've seen all these ads for plastic toys while I was reading this or that thing, right? So you're faced with both the role of big tech companies in shaping our intention, and then the philosophical question, like what is your real intention versus what you think is your intention, but you've just been primed to think it is by your surround online. So yeah, I wonder how you see progress toward the intention economy, but also whether your framing or perspective on that has changed in the last 12 years.
Oh boy. There's several things there. To go back to Cluetrain, To me, I mean, the most quoted line from it was one that I came up with actually in the mid '80s, which is markets are conversations, and the whole idea behind that was not the way it was taken by the marketers, which is, hey, we can start talking with people directly rather than just advertising at them, and it was a lot of insanity there. But it was something to Chris Locke, who's one of the other authors, and it was really his voice, and he's gone now, sadly. He was a really interesting dude, a great writer. Um, but what got us going on the book, when actually first it was just a website, then it became a book because the website was a hit. And it was a one-liner, and he put it in a little graphic, a little GIF, and sent it to David Weinberger and Rick Levine and me that said, we are not seats or eyeballs or end users or consumers. We are human beings, and our reach exceeds your grasp. Deal with it. And it was such a bold statement, and that was very implicit in the internet that we knew then. The internet
Yeah.
that happened
That's right.
was one with just enormous personal freedom. I mean, my website, my email server, all of this were under my desk. You know, I had a 16 static IP addresses in my house. Horrible connection. It was like in the kilobit range, but I had a server. It was my server. There it was. I had enormous freedom. I'm writing online. I didn't need a publisher. I could write on my own. Before it was called blogging, and this kind of stuff that I wanted to write, especially for tech magazines, was not what I called vendor sports, which is like Apple versus Microsoft. Who wins? I hated that shit.
Yeah.
And so I just wrote what I wanted, and it was awesome, and it was great. And Chris and David were in a very similar position. Both of them had independent publications. And I think that in terms of a get on what the internet fundamentally is, it was right. It was hopelessly, not hopelessly, but terribly naive about the power of, I mean, I want to credit where due. There's some stuff only big companies can do. There just is. And there's scale that you can only get from big. And it made more sense in the long run for all of our websites to be in a giant Linux pile of servers that are inside of AWS or Azure and 50 other places.
I don't know that I agree with that.
Well,
I mean,
okay, well, let's table that for a
yeah,
second, because I want to.
sure thing. Sure
But
thing.
I would love to hear. You know what? When we get symmetrical internet all the way down to the local level, and I could put servers here, and I can make it happen. Fucking A, I'd love that if that can happen.
Yeah.
But just set that aside for a second.
Yeah.
Just go to the intention economy, because I don't know what our
Sure.
timing is like here.
So we have another hour, so don't worry.
Oh, we do. Okay, well, we can
We're
roll.
until when? Yeah.
I think I mean, I expected something like that to happen within 10 years. I think now it's going to take, I don't know what. I think it's going to be, I said in the book that Amara's law would apply. Amara didn't come up with Amara's law, but it's an obvious one once you hear it, which is we overestimate in the short term and underestimate in the long. And I think I overestimated in the short term how fast the intention economy would happen. And I think in the long run, it'll be massive once it happens. And all it says is, you know what? We will have much better markets if customers are more involved in actual product development, communications, all of it. Bill Joyce said something like this about companies when he said at Sun, when he was at Sun. He was one of the founders, and he wrote BSD in the first place. He was Linux before there was Linux. He said, most smart people don't work here. They're working everywhere else. And, at that time, Sun was busy telling itself it was smart all the time. But most smart people were somewhere else. The curb weight of expertise about a company is in its customers. It's not inside the walls of the company. People have far more experience with what they buy than the company selling it, and can provide much better feedback. And if they're involved in product development, if they're involved in a communication matrix where intelligence flows both ways, and your experience with a product over time can inform the company about what happens with it. I'm talking right now to an LG 27-inch 5K screen. I have two of them. They both have the same problems. I'd love to tell LG, here's how this is not working out. here's some stuff I love. I love the color on it. I think the camera's good. It's a 1080p camera. Seems to work well. But both of them have like there's a little thing mechanically that's not quite right with it. The USB thing in it is flaky. They maybe they know that anyway. But me as a customer, it's not that I'm loyal or anything. I think it will help other customers to have them know what my experience with this product is and how I might improve it. And that goes for everything that we use. I think if we could have better relationships with companies that are based on mutual self-interest or mutual interests, whether they're self-interest or not, is a much more efficient marketplace than the one that we have where that is the industrial age that hasn't ended yet. And we kind of overestimated that in the Cluetrain Manifesto. We thought, hey, industrial age over, fine, bye, we're done. That was wrong. It's still here and very much here, but that model is they know best what they're doing and we don't, and we're just consumers. We are not producers. We have nothing useful to say. Oh, they'll survey us. They love to survey us all the time. And all surveys, by the way, are mostly about busting the poor schmuck that talked to you last. So we can make a much better marketplace and a much healthier business ecosystem if customers are more involved. That's all there is. That's all I'm saying. With
certainly could. What I started thinking as you're talking is, okay, so why isn't it much like that, right? Like, I mean, Google wants people to use its products, but the conversation between Google search and Gmail teams and users is not much of a two-way dialogue. Like my input on all the crap Google puts at the top of the search page, or my input on the reorganization of Gmail. I mean, I guess I could find some address to send that feedback to if I wanted to, but I won't, because it's just like throwing it into the
yeah. And
void,
if you've been to Google
right?
and talked to people there, any one of them will tell you, I don't know what to do. It's like,
yeah. Well, sure.
It's a giant
And
flywheel, and I don't have much to do with that.
I mean, the same with hardware, right? Like I got my wife to switch finally from Apple to Android because folding phones are cool. But I mean, how do you give feedback to Apple that they should make a folding phone? Like, I mean, on the in the long run, they will get that feedback if they see what people are buying in the market. But that's a very inefficient dialogue. But what occurs to me is it may be that too often that dialogue would naturally lead in a direction that would screw up the hegemony and market share of the
natural order of
corporation
things.
So they don't necessarily want that dialogue. So if you look at social media, look at Twitter or something, I mean, the dialogue with customers would naturally lead to the idea that customers want to be able to take their history and their contact list and like very trivially export it to bring to some other network. And dialogue with customers would surface that point immediately, but that point goes against Twitter's most obvious business model because it would lead people to go to their competitors, right? So in many cases, it seems like there's a motivation not to have too rich of a two-way conversation because of the fear that two-way conversation will lead to something that will screw up the infinite money machine that the company has gotten, right? And I'm not sure how you get around that except by somehow breaking the model that it's these big for-profit corporations doing everything.
Well, a couple of things there. First with, I mean, Twitter is unfortunately an example only of itself, and it's a terrible one. And since Elon Musk took it over, I mean, their customers aren't you and me; they're the advertisers. And Elon Musk told them to go fuck themselves. So that's not a functional company right
Facebook
now.
Facebook would exemplify the same point, though.
Right? I suppose. I mean, Facebook is. I mean, again, I think that's also an example only of itself, and I think that the the I mean, what we call social media, I think, is epiphenomenal. You know, its era will probably end up being 2006 to 2030, and then we have some other thing to complain about after that. Um, when I talk about the marketplace, I'm actually talking about all of retail, all of the service organizations, the construction workers, the you know, um, uh, anybody making food, anybody making healthcare equipment. I mean, there's um,
Well, sure, but we
you
have
know,
no
I
way
mean,
to give we have no way to get feedback there either. Like
no,
if I
we
buy,
don't,
I
and
mean,
there's
it's yeah.
yeah, so we haven't invented it yet. I'm a
The
great
problem
believer
is
in
everywhere in
yeah.
terms
I
of
mean,
that.
I once said something called Searls' second law, which said invention is the mother of necessity, and then a client of mine said, "Oh, Thorstein Veblen said that 100 years ago, but it still applies." I mean, um, I didn't need earbuds until I saw them, and now I need them, right? And it was, I mean, uh,
Yeah.
what's his the writer John Updike back in the '60s said, I mean, he's a brilliant, brilliant guy. I mean, he there was possibly the best descriptor who ever walked. I mean, it's just an incredibly brilliant writer. He said, "We live in the age of full convenience because of what? We have shoes and copy machines and cars. The internet was decades away at that point, and now we live in a different age of full convenience, right? But it's still
Taking convenience to the
yeah, but it's still
silly
fucked up. I mean,
extreme.
what's
Yeah.
convenient about subscription TV right now? Nothing. I mean, it's like,
No, we've
you know,
actually gone all
it's
the way back to the cable TV model.
it's
We just pay for
well,
everything separately.
we blew the cable. They blew the cable TV model, which they call linear now, into pieces. It's still there. Um, this one woman I know because she loves TV and she's addicted to it. She pays $500 a month for TV, for all of it. So I just any subscription service, screw it. I'll subscribe to it. It's on Paramount, it's on Peacock, it's on Tubi, whatever. I'll subscribe to that too. And cable,
Yeah.
got all the cable. The
That's what
sports
I mean,
package.
though.
Yeah,
It
let's
adds
get
back
those.
up to what you used to pay for
Yeah.
cable to get all the
Oh, it's
streaming
way
things
past
to be
that.
able to
It's
watch
way past it.
what you
Yeah.
want.
Except now you still have BitTorrent. So I mean,
And
Which
you
is
still have BitTorrent
which
if you
my
want
friends
it.
often remind me is the best social network, the best streaming service there is.
Yeah.
Even though
So
it does have messaging. So I want to let Desi ask a question because she's been
go for
trying
it.
for a long time.
All
Desi, this
right.
is actually very. It was
you've
gonna
you've
be.
been you've been you've been very polite, Desi, while
She
we
has been
drilled
very
on.
polite.
Yeah.
Desi, take it away, Desi.
You mentioned the concept of money left on the table when demand goes unheard and a sale is not completed. How can intent casting help mitigate or eliminate MLIT, and what impact would this have on the overall efficiency and effectiveness of the marketplace?
Okay, so the initial is actually it's an acronym because you can pronounce it as MLOT, MLOTT, which is money left on the table. This actually came from conversations in the early aughts with public broadcasters, um, and I'd noticed because I hang out in academic environments. If you ask now, it's probably not true anymore because everybody's on podcasting and streaming. But if you go back a few years and you ask the intelligentsia in the U.S., how many people here listen to public radio? Everybody's hand goes up. How many of you pay for it? 10%. And then I would ask, okay, how about if it was real easy? Another 10% go up. And I said, well, how about if they don't turn the programming off for a week and a half and plead poverty and all that? And more hands went up. And well, that's money left on the table. A lot of if it was real easy to pay for free goods in your own ways and on your own terms, and we came up with a way to do that. We invented it. It was called Emancipate. It's still laying out there. It's on a wiki at the ProjectVRM site. And actually, some people have shown an interest in it lately. Again, is it 18-year, not a little less than that. That was like 2009. We came up with that. But a system by which it's your system. I can log everything I listen to, all the music, all of the podcasts or whatever, and I would have a budget for dispersing that on a pro rata basis to whoever I felt like. But I would have a log that would show all of this is my log, and I would disperse it, and it would go to the payment societies like Sound Exchange, which are the ones that pay artists. And I have a policy. I'll say I'm going to pay a penny a listen, even for music I already own, which I don't really own. I have rights to it, but I have mechanical rights, whatever the hell they call it. But right now they're getting fractions of a penny. I'll give them a penny, and Sound Exchange will be glad to distribute that. And we talked to the public broadcasting people about that. And because we did this at Harvard, which has awesome convening power. If you say, and I was new there at the time, hey, we're having a meeting here to talk about funding public radio. Who wants to come? And like the top people for all these stations all over, that'd be 10 stations or 15 from around the country came. And we all met in a room and talked about these ideas and how we could make this happen. And they all walked away saying, these are our listeners. They're our members. We're not going to let anybody else have them. It was, and, we put in front of them something that was, here's a way you can make twice the money. And let's make this happen. We can work together on this. And it was, nah. So, but that's money left on the table. I think for music, for artistic goods, for all the creative goods that are mechanically free, but have value, and people do value and have a willingness to pay for, if you lower the threshold of payment to close to nothing, which is, for example, what you have when you pay a tip, when with Uber, with the barista or whatever, there's a convention there. We could have that convention with music if we wanted to. It was Helen Cox Richardson has the top newsletter on Substack. People pay for it voluntarily. She makes like $5 million a year on this. She's a historian. She just writes this newsletter. $5 million. I read that number. I don't know even if it's half of that or a quarter of that, that's a hell of a salary. And that was MLOT. She invented money left on the table. And hats off to Substack. They found a way to make that happen. But I don't want to have to do it only through Substack. And I don't want to subscribe to, I think I'm not speaking for more than myself here. Most people don't want to subscribe to everything. They want to be able to pay on an a la carte basis, but not
For what
with,
they want.
I'm going to do micropayments and make it real complicated. No, we can log it, and I have goodwill, and I'm going to have a budget for this. And at the end of the year, it's going to go out, and my AI is going to know whether this
And
one
AI will help.
is
Next
yeah,
question,
this one is
Desi.
tax
Take it
deductible
away,
because
Desi.
the ones going to public broadcasting, those are tax deductible. And the ones going to schools and to whatever that's a nonprofit, that's tax deductible. And the ones that are directly to people are not tax deductible, but there's still an expression of goodwill.
In the
and I'm glad to
context
pay
of
it.
shopping, you mentioned the concept of intent casting and the role AI can play in helping consumers find what they want to purchase. Can you expand on how AI can facilitate a more personalized and efficient shopping experience while also protecting consumer privacy?
Sure. If I have a robot of my own that's watching out for my interests, I think inevitably we will all have intelligent agents that do this. They could do the searching. They could do they could stay tuned to Facebook Marketplace and Craigslist and Amazon and whatever else is out there. They could actually, I suppose, this would be a fun thing, have multiple Amazon accounts so that they could look at which one is going to be cheapest, because Amazon is busy gaming what they're charging based on what you've got a Macintosh, you'll pay more than somebody with a Windows machine, that kind of thing. But an AI can help with that kind of stuff. I think having an AI agent, or just, Siri is one, but it's kind of a crude one. But
she's getting better.
That's watching out. That's watching out for us. And what we need. I may have mentioned earlier, it may have been on another call because I'm on these all day, that right now I'm in the market for a car. Not in a big market. I can continue to drive our 2005 Subaru Outback indefinitely, but it needs a bunch of work. I don't feel like doing it. The car I want is a 2019 Volkswagen Sport Wagon or an Audi Allroad. And I'm not willing to pay more than 25 grand. I want it to have less than 45,000 miles. I don't want to go looking for that. Somebody else find it for me. Now, Carvana thinks is going to find it for me. They're the best thing I've seen so far, but I can't drive that car. This going to be delivered to you, and you have right of refusal of it if you want. and a period of time during which you can reject it. And they make that rather easy. I am told. I've not bought that way. I rather like it, but I don't want to have to do just with Carvana. I want to look across the country and see what the opportunities are there. But I don't want to do it. That's why I've given up shopping for the car, by the way, because it's too much work. I can drive the old Subaru. It's fine. But an AI can help with that a lot. An AI can help with, I mean, a gigantic thing is health, diagnosing things. I have a watch that tells me what my heart rate is. It can't tell me blood oxygen anymore because Apple just lost a patent battle over that one, and your blood oxygen is going to get turned off on your Apple Watch. But the truth is, going back to open source again, we should all have blood oxygen oximeters, I mean, of some kind of our own. We should be able to do a lot of our own diagnostics. With the help of an AI, that'd be much easier than it is now. Um, when I meet with doctors at IU Health, this is Indiana University Health, which is the local one here, which I'm now with, I spend more time answering the survey about how well I was served than I spent with the actual doctor in the room. I spent 10 minutes with the doctor, and the survey is like 12 minutes long. It's insane. We can do better than that. And AI will help.
Great. I believe you had another question, Desi.
In your writings, you mention the importance of providing a secure and minimal disclosure method for customers to provide the sum they are willing to pay. Can you explain how this would work in practice and why it is crucial for both customers and sellers?
Yeah, so how would that work exactly?
Well, I mean, I think we have, in the physical world, we have minimum disclosure all the time. We don't wear a name badge when we walk into a store or walk down the street. We tend to inform people on an as needed basis what they need to know in order to do things, to provide us with a service. In most cases, you go in to buy a candy bar or something, it is, the seller doesn't need to know who you are. You pay them their cash and then you walk out. If it's in a neighborhood and you're familiar with them, that's cool. They recognize you come in.
But if they only knew who
Yeah.
you were, they could sell you so much.
Yeah, and that's
more
bullshit. I
stuff.
mean, so consider the cognitive overhead of that. I mean, part of the whole idea with the intention economy is let's lower the cognitive overhead involved in having interactions with companies. Okay, and there's enormous, ridiculous cognitive overhead on their part right now with the surveillance system that they've got. This $2 trillion a year business that's based almost entirely on surveillance-based guesswork. That is based on the bad theory of you, which is, you're shopping all the time. You are homo consumerists, and we need to tell you what you want because we know you better than you do, which is just wrong and bullshit. But they don't know it's bullshit because there's so much money moving around in it that they just think, well, this is great.
I mean, is it working well enough as far as they're
Well,
concerned?
there are great examples in the physical world of how this can work. My favorite is Trader Joe's. Why do people love Trader Joe's? They do. People love Trader Joe's. Okay.
It's cheap.
Well,
Not bad. It's
when I
just
was
cheap.
writing the intention economy, I was put in touch with a guy named Doug Rauch, spelled Rausch, German for smoke, but it's pronounced Rauch, who was the president of Trader Joe's for the last 14 years at that time, had recently retired. And this is in Boston. And Fortune had just come out, or maybe it's Forbes, with a cover story about the most secretive company in the world, Trader Joe's. And he said, no, we're not secretive. We just don't talk. We just don't talk to anybody about what we do. We only talk to our customers. So he said, one of the reasons their goods are cheap is they have no marketing. They have an opt-in newsletter called the Fearless Flyer. That's it. That's the extent of it. And they have a float in the Rose Parade on New Year's Day. That's the extent of their marketing. They don't do advertising of the normal stuff. It saves them an enormous amount of money. All they try to do, and this is the trader part of it, is we're going to get good goods to you, and we're going to have a limited number of SKUs, stock keeping units. They have like 3,000 SKUs. Maybe it's less than that. There's a lot of stuff they don't sell there. They don't sell motor oil. They don't sell all kinds of stuff you might be able to buy in an ordinary grocery store. And they're going to get, basically the best products they can get from the suppliers that they use, many of which, like PepsiCo, are brands from other contexts, but make things for them. They basically OEM those things, but they do quality control. But they actually, somebody in the back channel says they do radio spots too. That's a new thing, and I know when they started out, they did. Trader Joe himself did his own testimonial kind of spots on the classical station in Los Angeles, because they were only in LA at the time, and it was very personal and kind of low key. So, and I suppose they're doing some of that now, but there's a whole chapter in the intention economy about this. But basically, there's no cognitive overhead on your part, very low cognitive overhead on your part. That's even why if you ask, wait a minute, where is the granola? The person will walk you to the granola, because they want that learning experience. They want to know more about, how people understand the store. And all the people who
Their
work there
employees are treated differently too, right? I
yeah,
mean,
and their employees are treated differently, and they're incredibly disclosing. I mean, when I was at the one in Indianapolis, they asked, why isn't there one in a Trader Joe's in Bloomington? It's a college town. It's perfect for that. And they said, well, and I won't give the name of it, but one of the local stores opposed it and brought political pressure to bear, and Trader Joe backed out of trying to come here, which is interesting. But they disclose that. They say, yeah, blah. Here's what I think happened there. It's the thing is, it's a very human store, and I mean, we can
you
get
feel
into
it when
this,
you're there. You feel
and you
better.
feel it when you're
You feel-
there. I mean, it's
you
not
feel
a
better about
complicated.
giving them your money too.
Yeah, and
You
it's
feel
not
better about the
complicated.
whole thing.
It's just not. And did you bring a bag? No. Well, we have paper bags. Great. We're not going to charge you for the paper bags. It just takes up. It's a, there's more room for the humanity to work. But one of the things Doug told me is there is not, they don't call their customers consumers. They're customers. They're people. They do everything they can to have as little bullshit as possible between them and you, and as much goodwill in going in both directions, which turns out to be a very low overhead way to operate and saves a lot of money along the way. And they're honorable in the sense, he said, if we find a cheaper way to get, a box of cereal to you, we're not going to like pad up the profit on that. We're going to make the same profit on it and just lower the price for you. They never have anything on sale. They don't have members. They don't have loyalty programs. All loyalty programs are out to fuck you, by the way. That's what they are.
Wait,
I think about this with CVS.
Elaborate on that.
Okay, like, say, so I have a CVS app on my phone, right? So all I want to do is I live in multiple places. I travel a lot. I would like to be able to pick up the subscription to some other CVS. You can't even switch that on the phone. The app on the phone is all about promoting crap to you. If you don't get the emailed receipt, you get something that's 4 feet long that has discounts for crap you already bought with so many conditionalities in it. It's infinite cognitive overhead on their part as well as yours. You look at the vitamins or something, and here's the discount price. Here's this. You buy 2 of these, you get this or that. Way too complicated.
They're trying to make
way
some
too
game
complicated.
out
And
of
the
it.
point, here's the point. Everybody does it. Is what you do. They'll go hire a company that helps them do that. There are companies they're all part of in a more slow-mo way of what Cory Doctorow calls enshittification, right? Companies get big and they enshittify what they do. Amazon, Google used to have advertising and just, plain text off on the right side, and it was really simple. Now it's like 90% of what you see on some pages when you open it up are, you want to know the height of Mount Everest, and you have a page of vacations in Nepal. Yet that's not what you wanted. You want to know the height of Mount Everest. But now you have perplexity.ai, which I really like, which will give you sources. Oh, we looked in these 5 places, and here's the answer.
Oh, that's cool.
But
I haven't heard of that yet.
Yeah, no, I like perplexity.ai. Check it out. I think it basically runs in ChatGPT. But think of how much simpler CVS would be if nothing was on sale. Just go in. This is the price. That's what it is. Pay for it and leave. Not they're
But
everywhere.
their prices
so,
go up and down constantly, though.
well, let them go up and down. I mean, the nice thing about Trader Joe's is if the price goes up, instinctively, inherently, you know, okay, their costs went up.
Something
That's all
went
right.
up. Yeah,
The,
yeah.
you know, the eggs were $2 a dozen. Now they're $2.50. That's what happened. It's just how it goes, you know. And I mean, there's so many things that disappear at Trader Joe's that drives me crazy. Like I like having fiber cereal rather than taking Metamucil, which is weird. But so if they had a fiber cereal that tasted much better than Fiber One. My gastroenterologist said, get Fiber One, too sweet, but probably Post or whoever makes Fiber One makes it for Trader Joe's. But their fiber cereal was terrific. Well, it's been discontinued. So, and I actually made an audible
They weren't
sound
selling
of
enough of it.
agony when I went to a Trader Joe's, and they said it was discontinued. And you discontinued the granola that had ancient grains in it. That was amazing. Yeah, that too. We're sorry. But instinctively, I know it's not that they don't, they did some market survey or something. It's probably that, and I found that out later, that Fiber One, there was a shortage of whatever goes, Sicilium or whatever the crap is that goes into Fiber One. There's some substance that's in there that's in short supply. So General Mills, whoever makes Fiber One, had the same problem. So that's what it is. It was a supply chain problem of some kind. But we know that. We kind of, well, this is Trader Joe. They're not out to screw me, But I do think CVS is out to screw me. And I shouldn't, but no, I should actually. I mean,
I was going to say, why shouldn't you?
and any company with
clear.
a loyalty program has earned a healthy skepticism, because
what do you think should or could be done now in practice to move toward more fully realizing an intentioned economy? Then I mean, you said it's coming along more slowly than you had envisioned, and even my thoughts about collective intelligence don't really contradict your point, because even if the intention is associated with a collective rather than an individual, a very small number of the interesting collectives of people are having their own intention drive what happens from the big corporations of the world, right? So what like with open source, there was a clear action plan, right? Like you put this license agreement on your code, then copy left and so forth, takes force and kind of spreads, and something kind of like that happened, right? So what's an action plan for de-shitification, or whatever we want to call it, right?
What's the opposite of en-shitification? De-shitification,
I think
guess.
de-shitification, that makes sense.
Well, I think de-shitification is a good idea. I mean, if I had a simple answer for you, Ben, I'd give it to you. I mean, I've been at this for 18 years or more. I mean, go back to Cluetrain. It's almost, actually, Cluetrain will be 25 years old this April. So, as a website, and David and Ray and Rick and Chris and I were working on that exactly now 25 years ago. And I think if you told us this is where we'd be now, we'd probably say, forget it. We're going to just
come on,
drop our pens
absolutely.
and, but we needed that optimism. We needed that sense of excitement, and
you convinced me at the time. I was like,
definitely
30 years old. I totally believed it.
Yeah. David Weinberger
we all did.
He had all these different Cluetrain bumper stickers. We decided we would have no T-shirts, no bumper stickers, no branding at all. And at this point, by the way, Cluetrain, at least when Twitter still was Twitter, it was tweeted multiple times a day, like the hashtag Cluetrain. It belongs in
we were watching
in Oxford.
It happen. Yeah,
it belongs in Oxford at this point. But the thing is that, I mean, again, we need the invention that mothers the necessity. I'm thinking, if I were young and I was enterprising about this in a B2B way, I would take, hey, what is it that Trader Joe's does? and I would sell a service that does that to the CVSs of the world. Like, and then here's a really simple pitch: go to CVS, say, you take all the money you're spending right now on their loyalty program, do what I'm telling you, and pay me for that, okay? But not as much as you're paying for the other thing. Here's a de-incertification program. No more loyalty program. Simple pricing. Do what Trader Joe's does. We've looked at it. We're going to copy it for you. Do what Trader Joe's does. People will love you. You already have it covered. You have too many locations to begin with. It's fine. Let's do that. In a certain way, I hate to say this, Starbucks has that. I mean, you kind of know Starbucks is, they make
You know
coffee.
what you're getting.
Never mind that it's a dairy company that sells coffee, flavoring for dairy products, but it's very simple and straightforward. It's not a complicated business, and CVS could be like that. Well, actually,
and Starbucks' union is
and
some of them
you
are
know
unionized now, so
I'll tell
they're
you something.
coming around.
Oh,
in
they're
that
coming around. Was
only some of
Starbucks in a
them,
way?
but yeah.
So here's a story, and it's a worthwhile one, I think. Not
all
long
worthwhile, Doc.
after Cluetrain came out, all of us were on the on the speaking circuit for that, and after the book came out, and I was at a retailing conference in Lucerne, Switzerland, and I gave a talk about how companies have souls, and Trader Joe's is an example of a company with a soul. Apple has a soul. It's always going to be Steve Jobs' company. That's his soul. It's in there. Can't help it. There's a bit of Woz in there too. It's in the soul of that. Microsoft has a soul. Steve Jobs nailed it when he said they have no taste. Yeah, they don't. They don't. Go do AI through
And Steve
Bing.
Ball nailed it when he said developers.
Yeah,
developers.
exactly. So go to Bing Create. Let's see, and I mean, and this is how Microsoft this thing is. Okay, Bing Creator. Oh shit, where is it?
You're gonna
Okay,
share
it's
your
in.
screen. Share your screen, Doc.
No, I
if
don't
you're
want to
gonna
share.
do
Oh, I
this.
could share. Oh yeah, okay.
If you're gonna do it in real time.
Oh, I can do it. I
show
can
us
share a
what you're
screen.
looking at. Yeah, right at the
Let's
bottom.
do it.
It's
Let's
a
do it.
little
Okay,
a little
so
TV set with an arrow. Says share
okay, I have to go
screen.
back to your tab, and I have too many
See if
tabs.
it
I have thousands
works.
of tabs open. Okay,
Yeah,
then
you might have to pick
where's
the
the little
tab
TV
too.
set?
At the
Where's the little
bottom
TV set?
of right underneath us on the screen. Right
Okay,
underneath
so when
the
it looks like a
pictures of
TV
people.
camera, looks like a
No,
camera.
it's the one in the middle. If you mouse over it,
Oh,
it says
show the share screen. Oh, the thing. Okay,
It looks like
pick one.
up facing our upload. Yeah.
Being created. No, it's not that one. See, Zoom would give me a picture of all of those. This is one in.
I know you can say a whole screen, entire screen. I think you just have to.
I don't want the whole
go
screen.
further.
It's a
All right,
27-inch screen. It's busy as hell.
Just move
no,
on with the point. Then it's okay.
No. Let me figure it out. If I can do a window. It says, it's a tab. I want the window. There's the right window. Share. Okay, here we go.
All right.
Is it sharing?
All
there
right.
we go.
Yep,
So
it's showing.
So that okay. Here is brand. I mean, oh my God. Somebody did a thing once. If Microsoft were to build a Volkswagen, the whole idea with a Volkswagen Bug was it was terribly simple, right? And they showed all the ways it would become complicated. It's the Microsoft Bing image creator from designer. What the fuck is that? I mean, it's stupid. I mean, it's a terrible name. That's my only point there. And trying to get it to do what I want. I'm doing a lot of writing about what's happening to radio because I'm an old radio guy, and like any AM station that's out there that occupies land for their towers, they're all being cut down because the land is worth more than the station. And so I wanted to show here 4 AM towers, which are plain and have no adornment, being cut down in an open field. No, they all have adornment. It's more than 4. They're not being cut down.
Why do you
There's
use
some
that one,
things
Bing,
it
instead of
can't.
Midjourney or one of the ones that
I know. I've tried.
will give you what you want? Oh, okay.
I know. Stable diffusion, complete loss. Dolly. I mean, I know these now. Dolly can't do eyeballs, at least not for me. There's all these weird things.
No,
Anyway,
So you tried them all and ended up back at Bing.
but to go back to
crazy.
CVS again and what
Yeah.
I would do to disenshittify, there should be a company out there. It's a really easy company to come up with. You'd read my chapter in the intention economy about what Trader Joe's does, because Trader Joe's told me over lunch how it worked, and sell it. Just go from go from one to the story I was telling. Okay, so I'm in Lucerne, and I give this talk about how companies have souls, and the soul of Microsoft is, an enshittified name for the product, um, and and uh, and so the next morning I'm walking through the hotel dining hall area, and this American guy, middle-aged American guy, said, "Hey, I really liked your talk last night. It was really great. Thanks." I said, "Okay, you're gonna be over at the conference?" "Yeah, I'll be there later." And the guy actually was the first guy to talk, and he gave a talk in the morning. And it was Lee Scott. He was the CEO of Walmart, which is just busy opening stores, a thing that later failed in Germany at the time. And afterwards, he came over to me and my wife Joyce and said, "Hey, when we're having lunch, can I sit with you for lunch?" I said, "Yeah." "And do you mind?" "Hey, man, I would like to pepper you with questions." And one of the questions I asked him was, "Are there any retailers you actually envy that you think are doing a better job than you?" He said, "Oh yeah, Costco. Costco kicks our ass. We copied Costco with Sam's Club, and it's not as good. We can't put a Sam's Club near a Costco because they'll kick our ass. They are really good. They treat their employees really well. We don't. We he named all
This
these
is
things.
Trader Joe's. Wait, who
This
is
yeah,
saying
this
this?
no, this is the
Walmart.
guy who runs
Oh,
Walmart.
Walmart.
Okay,
Now it
and
makes sense.
but he
Yeah.
explained he also explained in his talk how Walmart worked, and it was really, and I won't go into that, but it was an interesting story on its own, because the soul of Walmart is the 5 and 10 cent store that Sam Walton operated in Bentonville, Arkansas.
I don't think
and
Walmart has a soul. Walmart might be the one that has
no,
no soul.
it's cheaper. I mean, he said, like, for example, Sam, they don't spend more than 1% of their revenues on advertising as a matter of policy. Came down from Sam Walton. Of course, they make $1 trillion,
No,
so
I
that's
just
still
mean
a
in the
lot of
way
money
that,
for
in terms of the
advertising.
way they treat their employees. They don't
Yeah,
pay
I mean,
them
well, they're
enough to live.
disposable. They come
They
and go.
they have to go to soup kitchens and things to eat in a lot of towns,
Yeah,
and
I
they
mean,
actually
we can
maximize the
shit
resources of
on
the
them, but
town.
they have a shtick and they're
Okay.
doing it. And he has long since left, and he was a pretty. I mean, he was hired at, and he didn't tell this story, but he was hired at Walmart as the CEO after when Sam Walton wanted to hire somebody to be the CEO. He was at the time Lee was running Yellow Freight, and he he brought him in, and he said, we want to hire you. And he said, "I don't want to work for any company that takes 120 days to pay their bills. I don't want anybody to go over 60 days." And apparently that's something that Walmart did at that time. And they said, "Great, come here and fix that. We don't want to do that either." That's a bad practice that they had. He basically said he took over, running an ocean liner that ran a certain way, and he tried to make it better. But my point, though, is that there the cognitive overhead of enshittifying your company is in the long run going to be one of the things that sinks your company. And
I'm intrigued.
I hope so.
I'm intrigued by the idea that companies have such a hard time sort of evolving their soul or their spirit, because
well,
some humans will do that, right? Like you look at Wittgenstein as a philosopher, early
yeah,
Wittgenstein and late
yeah,
Wittgenstein
der
are
alte
not,
and der neue Wittgenstein.
yeah, they're not the same, right? Like one is a
Right,
logical
yeah,
positivist and the other was basically an impressionist postmodernist thinker, right? But
right.
well, of course, what happened is he went to the war, and that just
And then,
transformed him in profound ways. But I wonder, are there no
well,
examples of companies that have sort of developed and evolved in that way? Like, is the mind of a company somehow more rigid than the mind of an individual?
yes and no. I mean, I think the important thing is what Jeffrey West said, and he put it in a book called Scale, which is a hard read, but watch the YouTube thing that was like 15 years ago
Mm-hmm.
about why why cities live and companies die. Cities are open systems and companies are closed systems, and they're closed systems like human beings are closed systems.
Well, but Wittgenstein
Wittgenstein died.
fundamentally
Okay,
evolved, right?
yeah,
But
he
I mean,
evolved,
he did
and
evolve. He underwent like
you're
a
evolving, and I'm evolving, and we're doing this. So this is human beings. I had a really great conversation once with Tim O'Reilly at at one of his conferences. He doesn't do anymore, but I really like their conferences. Um, and I think, Lisa, you and I first met at Foo Camp, actually, I think, speaking of Tim O'Reilly.
Full camp and O'Reilly conferences before that. Yeah.
And you didn't want to cook me soft scrambled eggs because you thought I'd get salmonella. I remember this. I don't know if you still cook your scrambled eggs hard or not. But anyway.
I don't know.
And I remember Larry and Sergey were in the room because they were just guys at that time.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah. Larry camped out in the room next to me. We were camping out in the building.
Yeah.
And that whole year, that whole food camp was so surreal because it's really the last time before everything changed.
Yeah, it was. There was a state
before
change
the people, half the people there got famous, and the other half got
that happens.
Kind of famous,
but here's the thing. So I had this conversation with Tim about information and as a noun, and that's derived from the verb to inform, which is derived from the verb to form, which is to shape. And then this dialogue happened in roughly this way. Well, what we call authority is the right that we give certain other people or things to inform us, to form us, to shape us. And that we're learning animals all the time. And if we're healthy learning animals, we're learning all the time from others. And in this respect, the authority we give to others means, if you look at that word as well, this one-liner came out of that, which is we are all authors of each other. It was other people that authored Wittgenstein to some degree. I mean, I've been authored by him to a small degree, by Michael Polanyi, by George Lakoff, by Marshall McLuhan, by you. I learned about salmonella and scrambled eggs from Lisa, right?
I make this comment when I'm half asleep one day. Literally bring it up. I knew you for 2 years before food camp.
Oh, that's probably true. But I
literally think that we met while I was telling you.
No, I did. That's actually true. I remember this now. Thank you for that correction. That's actually true.
Yeah.
But that's an experience that stands out. But my point though is that we all learn from each other, and part of what the way I have complete faith that the attention economy is going to happen in the fullness of time. I do, because I think it's a more efficient way to do things, and we in the large sense are going to discover that. And I think disincentivizing companies is a worthy idea, and I hope somebody does it. It'll be somebody a lot younger than me, and they'll learn in the process. But it could be.
I'm curious. So whether there's something in the way corporations are organized that makes them
shitty,
even more. Not
they're organized around money.
No, that's not what I'm thinking. Because the companies can be amazingly good at doing certain things in certain periods of time, and they can be incredible. I'm thinking if there's something that makes them less open systems than individual humans.
I can specifically about the profit, about the shareholders, having that being the bottom line, the number one rule, if you will, of any corporation that's gone public.
Well, this is, I mean,
what do you mean? That's why you go public. I don't.
Well, that's why you go public. But you don't have to go public. You could go private too, or you could stay private. I mean, there's. You
don't have the shareholders, so that's much better.
Well, you do have shareholders.
The shareholders are, I think they're far more chimeric than they really are. I mean, it's so easy to say that, but we exist for our shareholders. The companies will say that, and CEOs will say that, and I think there's a certain, in some cases it's true, in other cases it's bullshit. Here's what what's his name? Most famous guy ever wrote about management, but Peter Drucker. Okay, Peter Drucker said, companies don't exist to make a profit; they exist to make shoes. That's what they are. They exist to make. I mean, I have relatives. They wanted to make a restaurant. Nothing in the experience of people in the world say. I mean, it's a terrible business to go into. They generally fail, and they're an enormous amount of work. But people that want to do it, want to do it for the love of it.
Aren't doing it for that reason.
I mean, they're, you know,
Well,
the
I think though, yeah, I mean, financial services is probably the biggest contradiction to that, but still, I mean, I think even if whether or not companies are trying to maximize shareholder value, I mean, often the best way to maximize shareholder value would be more of an open system, also, actually. So, I mean, the question still remains.
Well, that's always
why,
been true.
question still remains, why are companies not more open systems than they actually are? You could argue political parties in some ways are more open systems. Like the U.S. Republican Party has pivoted dramatically over
yeah,
time while still maintaining its integrity as an organization. It's pivoted radically. I mean, mostly for the worse, in my view, but still
oh, totally, yeah.
the fact of its pivoting and its evolution and development have been dramatic and much more so than
Yeah.
any company over a similar period of time.
Well, it's well, this gets to another thing that I'm big on as a writer, uh, which is stories, and people love stories. Stories, and stories consist of three elements in all cases: character, problem, and movement toward a resolution. Doesn't mean you ever get there, but there's that. Um, Nobody is more gifted at understanding this and making it work than Donald Trump. And I don't want to get this all into Trump, but Trump is an incredible showman at that. He characterizes other people and makes it stick. He causes problems on a constant basis and keeps them rolling. And that makes him infinitely interesting at all times. And that's how he hacked that party. And he also gets something about the mentality of people on the right in general, but especially the more ones looking for more simple solutions, which is that what George Lakoff wrote about, that there's a model of the country that has a strict father in charge of it, who's going to take care of everything for us. And that's what appeals. That's how authoritarianism appeals. He gets it. He's an authoritarian. He doesn't hide it. He's great at it. And he's incredibly gifted at that. And it's a horrible thing to, I mean, Hitler was too, go full Godwin on it. But yeah, and he was too, Great Onion piece recently about did Hitler say this or did Trump say it? It's pretty good. Go check it out.
I mean, Hitler was a
know.
far more effective authoritarian.
He was a far more effective
Trump
authoritarian.
is good at impersonating an authoritarian. He's fortunately not good at executing on it, which is, I guess,
and Hitler operated at the height of the
set.
industrial age, and
Sure.
the industrial age really peaked in World War II. It caused World War II and ended World War II. The West.
Well, I mean, Putin and Xi Jinping are in our current age and are far more competent authoritarians than
they are in
Trump.
their own ways, and they're fully electronic
well, he was
now.
just getting started. I mean, if he had had any
well,
more
he
time,
was very bad at curating appropriate henchmen, which is something that you need to do, right? I mean, so yeah, that's
something every mob boss needs. It's true.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Your consigliere.
Absolutely, but it is fascinating how the Republican Party has managed to develop almost like a human being through different phases and to pivot radically while still maintaining key characteristics and its organizational integrity. And in terms of the Lakoff thing of the strict father versus the nurturing mother, I'm not even sure the Republican Party in the era of Abe Lincoln was manifesting the strict father archetype. I think it wasn't. Like, I mean, I think it
wasn't.
It changed which ruling archetypes to use while maintaining its organizational integrity. And companies haven't done that, which is somehow tied with the inability of companies to maintain a rich dialogue with their user base, which we touched on earlier. Like that dialogicality back and forth seems to be part of what enables you to make these radical transitions in your life. And a political party kind of has to have that dialogicality, right? Because it's got to get the voters in the end. And a company can afford to have more one-way interaction, but the one-way interaction, it doesn't give you like an I-thou relationship with your environment, which I guess is a lot of what drives the radical transitions in development.
Yeah, so as Desi's moving her head around, so I'm wondering if there's a question coming from there for
Desi
any
wants
of
to
us.
have an I-thou relationship with us. Yeah.
Desi wanted to ask you some questions about news before we wrapped it up, actually,
Okay.
because your outlook on news and the way, we're all bloggers. I was one of the first video bloggers. It's been 20 years now. And in a lot of ways, we haven't fixed a lot of the problems we were trying to fix 20 years ago. It only
I
got
know.
worse, right? So
Yeah.
like,
Hmm.
anyway, so Desi, you have a question for Doc.
Can you expand on the concept of deep news and why it is important for communities to have access to historical archives?
Right. So credit where due. So if you go to my blog, which is really simple, is doc.searls.com, and there's a category at the top called News Commons, and that's what I'm working on here at Indiana University with the Ostrom Workshop, which is all about the Commons. Eleanor Ostrom, who started it, won a Nobel Prize for work on the Commons. Anyway, we want to have a News Commons here where newspapers have pretty much gone out of business. They were the center that held in the world and in the print age, and now for the most part they're gone. And there's a guy in town here. His name is Dave Askins, who was a one-man band reporting on City Hall for the most part and County Hall. And he covers politics, he covers local politics, and mostly governance. And he came up with the idea for deep news. And because he is not so much story-based as fact-based, and he wants decision makers to have facts and he sees archiving as a really critical part of this. There's a lot of conversation here about things like, well, where does the bike path go? Where there's a convention center here, what should it be called? Should it be expand or not? What's the history there? There's a history. They want to move the police station, and it's a really complicated thing because where the police station could move is onto city property, but the property that this police station's on now is actually family property, where the provenance of who owns what and what rights lie where is really complicated. And he wants to see, as news accumulates, that archives are kept about that. And as facts move into news, how can you best archive this stuff locally? And he calls that deep news, and he also calls this history-based news. But as the new mayor here in town, a woman named Carrie Thompson, put it to him when she had a conversation with him about it, her entire interest is decision makers need good information, whether or not it comes from newspapers or their replacement. And how do they get that? And having history-based news, among other things, and having good archives are a good way to frame that stuff up. So part of what we're working on here is the deep news part of it, but also what we call wide news, which is lots of different reporters contributing to a kind of a commons, and whole news, which is the way that thing actually works. And this is, I have 8 or 9 posts so far on this, which use a lot of AI, at least in the art side of it, which is kind of fun. And so anyway, so deep news is basically archive-based news and fact-based news. And that's at odds with the writing of stories, because stories are generally biased by the need to tell a story and have the characters have qualities that are human. And party A will say that guy's a liar, and party B will say he gets things done, and that's part of story as well.
And it's also
Yeah, I mean the deep news is very
shallow.
important. It's very important in the sense that, I mean, now you have a phenomenon online where people don't believe anything, right? And so you can, people from one political party will say one thing, people from another party will say another thing, and then if I try to point out, well, but that's wrong. Like look at this paper published by this historian there, this medical researcher, then that people will just say, well, why do you believe that paper written by that historian? Why do you believe that paper written by that medical researcher? Have you gone to their lab and have you have you audited that
Yeah.
that they didn't falsify everything? It's like, well, no, I wasn't in the medical research. And every now and then, some paper in New England Journal of Medicine actually is bullshit, because there was
Right.
some,
It turns out it was
right,
bullshit.
right.
Yeah. And
So every
well,
now and then, now most of it, I believe. So that the social construction of what we're willing to accept as probable ground truth seems like an important thing, and it's somewhat dissolving. Like there's less consensus on what is probable ground truth than there was 20 years ago or something, which is interesting. So if, I mean, having some archive of historical fact which we're willing to collectively accept as probably about as real as we're going to get, like, this is quite important, and it's not obvious how to achieve that, because people now will believe everything is fake or can be fake, right? So I'm like,
yeah.
There's that hesitancy. So I was saying this in the last show too. So you see some news and you would react a certain way, but you don't know it's real anymore. So you may take the time to go verify it. If it's a big thing, right, then you might go verify it, or you might get sidetracked and never do it. And so in a way, it just goes by, and who knows, it might not have been real anyway, kind of thing.
Yeah. One thing I discovered, it's not a very profound discovery, but it's an interesting one to me anyway, when I started hanging out at universities, is that it isn't turtles all the way down, it's ad hominem arguments all the way down. What you were just saying about it. Well, as the New England Journal of Medicine said that, and then, but if you go into that, they cite their sources, and their sources are generally some human being said something, and that human being has a degree and all that. And basically all this stuff comes out of medieval institutions. I mean, I know brilliant people who would never be able to get a job teaching because they don't have advanced degrees. Endless. I mean, I'm on a number of academic lists, and almost all the stuff coming through is, we need a postdoc on this, we need a postdoc on that. And why should you have there are all kinds of things that lots of us know lots about that don't have a doctorate and don't have an advanced degree and haven't gone through that mill. We've gone through a different mill and maybe know more or know better, but it doesn't matter. It's still an ad hominem argument because we said it, or so and so said it. It's true.
Well,
just,
it comes down. I mean, it comes down to networks of trust, and I mean, given that people are so good at deception and so oriented toward deception, then we fall back on very, very crude indicators to cut through that deception. Because I mean, if I know someone got a PhD in math, they don't have to be a genius, but I am going to be pretty sure they know a certain amount of math. And I haven't seen a counterexample to that yet, right? I haven't seen someone with a math PhD who didn't know a lot of math, but I have encountered people who present themselves as knowing a lot of math, but they don't really. They have a weird, shallow, fragmented knowledge that's not actually that useful. So these are very crude approximations, but they save our time in making an assessment of something. And you basically need these crude approximations because so many people are so full of shit otherwise. But yeah, I do think in the modern era, you don't really need these crude estimations. Like there should be ways to use AI to better assess if someone actually knows a bunch of math, which have less overhead than requiring someone to go through all the bullshit of getting a PhD just so they can provide an easily verifiable demonstration of what they know, right? So, and this gets back to the slowness of adaptation, right? Like the slowness of adaptation of universities is great and terrible, right? It's great.
Exactly, yeah.
It's great because this is the only institution that has consistently fostered blue sky research for a long time. Like it'll pop up in companies and then go away when the company's business model changes and run out of money. Like universities have kept fostering education and research, for more than 1,000 years in a couple of cases, and hundreds of years in many cases. On the other hand, they do so in a measurable but quite shitty way, right? And they're so slow at adapting and improving. And even though they do get feedback, they do accept feedback, universities do converse with their students, but the conversation with the students is sort of channeled into a small percent of what they do, and the basic way they operate isn't adaptive, right? So it seems this whole open-ended intelligence and openness, being an open system, it seems quite hard to achieve at the collective level. You're right that cities achieve it, and we've seen political parties can achieve it, but it seems a strange and difficult thing. I mean, I would say the Linux community has achieved it also. That's been an open system, which has evolved in many phases.
It's been a model. Yeah, it's been a model.
I'm not sure. I mean, it's interesting to me that, I mean, I don't want to veer too far from what I'm seeing on the back channel here. Mark Finner, who's an old friend.
Exactly. Good.
Yeah, yeah.
I hear from him.
So let me
He has a great thing
ahead.
there. Go ahead and
ahead.
read it. You want to read what he said?
Yeah, well, I was going to ask you that next. I was trying to do that before we wrapped it up. So
Okay, when
Mark,
he says,
Mark brings up,
oh, you can read it. Go ahead.
I feel the more that we don't know what is true anymore, the more we default to tribal allegiance. How can we break that shortcut, Doc?
Oh boy, you know, and one of the things I notice is that when somebody says that's a good question, it means they don't have the answer, or at least not yet. And that's a good question, because those tribes are open systems, right? And they remain tribes in part because they are that open system. I don't know. I mean, how do we somehow encourage and reward curiosity and openness to contradiction? In an earlier call today, we were talking about life in the academy in general and in educational institutions, and talk about a tribe. I mean, if you don't want to chant along with the lingo there, openness, inclusion, diversity, and all this stuff that's not ever uttered on the political right, but you have to. That's part of the tribal thing. It's all about that. I mean, almost every missive coming out of the top of one university I've been with is nothing but that stuff, and there's nothing wrong with it. It's just but it's tribal chant. It's what it is, and but you can't rub against that in any way. And I've seen people cancel hard and quick for that.
Yeah.
And I know my mother used to have this saying, I bite my tongue.
It's still better than getting beat up for being different. Inclusion.
No,
good,
absolutely.
right?
Listen, but that's a tribal statement. It's like my tribe's not beating people up on the street. You know,
it's a different kind of.
My tribe is opening up different holes in the ground.
It's a different kind of dogma. That's all.
Well, you have to create an anti-tribe tribe, right? I mean, you want to create a tribe where the core ritual is one that fosters openness and open-minded and heartedness. But that becomes like Nietzsche's Zarathustra, whose primary doctrine he preached was "Go away from me and resist Zarathustra." Yeah. He didn't wind up with a lot of followers, right? So anti-tribe tribe appears somewhat of a contradiction in terms, but on the other hand, some contradictions in terms become huge and grab a lot of audience and
overtake the real meaning of whatever it was that they're replacing. Yeah.
Good. Yeah.
I mean, if you think about what makes a good teacher is one that's going to challenge your, like what Clay Shirky said. You know, I mean, that's a great idea because you can think of so many bad uses for it. Tell us about it. You know, and she did not. The girl that came up with that idea did not expect that, and it was a great surprise to her, and it was a good thing. I think, I mean, human beings are, you know, your point about Wittgenstein is important. I mean, we're open while we're still alive, you know, and while we're alive, you want to embrace all kinds of challenges to your way of thinking. I mean, like I said,
Mark Finern is commenting now. He says, yes, curiosity about the real truth and embracing being wrong.
Yeah, you have to embrace being wrong.
Yay.
I mean, Cluetrain has been wrong about a lot of stuff for 25 years. And I've been wrong about the intention economy for going on 14 years. And I have some degree of faith that it will happen, but I also have to recognize and embrace that it may not, and it may not ever. And
we have to
when it
strive
does,
for it,
it may
though. You
happen
gotta
in a way that
strive.
I don't like, or I wouldn't like if I was still around. That's just, we have to be open to that. We have to be open to, how
You're just
how
trying to
people
push
who are
things in the
awful in
right
some ways.
direction, right?
Yeah, I
It's
mean,
like you got to push it in the right direction so it doesn't go too far in the other direction, but it's never going to be exactly what you're hoping for. It seems like,
yeah.
So look, we've got to
So
wrap it up
stay
because Ben
open.
has to
Okay.
go. And let Desi take it away, Desi.
And that's a wrap for today's episode, folks. We've explored the incredible potential of personal AI and the transformative power it holds for individuals. Remember, you are not just a data point. Embrace the opportunity to shape your own digitally empowered future. Stay curious, stay empowered, and keep paving the way for a more human-centric digital world. Thanks for joining us. Until next time.
Yay. Thank you,
Merci.
Desi.
All right, Desi.
Thank you so much, Doc. And thanks, Ben. And thanks, everybody, for joining. And next week, we'll
right.
be back with Peter Wang. So we'll see you all
Awesome.
next week. Sweet dreams.
Yeah, thanks. This
Bye-bye.
is a great
And let's
conversation.
let's
So
all talk
great,
offline
Doc.
too. Yeah, great talk to
Yeah.
everybody. And Mark, thank you, and everybody else in the back channel.